Revenge with Karen.
The last time I cried at work was when the break room fridge died and took my 3-day lasagna hostage. That was 10 years ago. Since then, not a single tear. Not when the founder's dog puked on my spreadsheets during an investor visit. Not when my team got blamed for a budgeting error caused by the founder's cousin's pet intern who thought Excel formulas were vibe killers. Definitely not when our payroll system glitched in 19 and accidentally direct deposited 12 grand into a long-gone intern's bank account. I just rolled up my sleeves, poured burnt coffee into my world's okayest manager mug, and fixed it. That was my role, the quiet janitor of chaos. 15 years of it. 15 years of duct taping this company together with nothing but institutional memory, sarcasm, and enough backup plans to run FEMA. I wasn't flashy, didn't play golf with the board or post performative Slack messages about crushing Q2. But I knew where the vendor contracts lived, which supplier had 3 DUIs but unbeatable prices, and exactly how many times our head of sales had fudged his quarterly report. I kept it moving, kept it quiet, kept it standing. Back when the founder still showed up in his too tight dress shirts and made dad jokes about synergy, the place had heart. We were scrappy. Weird? Hell, we once rebranded a server crash as a planned downtime meditation experience. Clients hated it. I loved it. There was trust then. Dysfunctional, yes, but trust. I could call up accounting and say, hey, that invoice smells fishy, and they'd send me 3 alternatives and a gif of Nicolas Cage crying. That was before the founder decided it was time to step back and empower the next generation. Translation: he wanted to retire to Florida, golf away his cholesterol problems, and leave the company in the hands of his freshly embodied nephew, Trent. I'll get to him. Don't worry, he deserves his own sermon. But before the rot spread, this place meant something. We stayed late, not because someone made us, but because no one else would understand how to unjam the ops dashboard when it froze mid-import. I kept my plants in the office windowsill, named them after ex-executives. When my ex-husband left, it was my team, not my sister, who brought over bourbon and Oreos. I was the weird aunt of the company. Uncool, yes, but dependable. I knew birthdays. I knew allergies. I knew who secretly cried in the stairwell after layoffs and who kept extra tampons in the supply closet just in case. And hey, if you've been listening this far and you're thinking, damn, I know this woman, maybe you do. Maybe she's you. Maybe she's your office mom, or that woman 3 cubicles down who never complains, but somehow holds the place together with a binder clip and 3 red pens. Either way, do her a favor, smash that like button and hit subscribe. 95% of you ghosts listen and dip, show a little love. We work hard on these stories, and every sub keeps the chaos coming. Anyway, back to the storm before the storm. In the good old days, I didn't have to explain my job. People just knew. Something broke, I fixed it. When a client threatened to walk, I walked them back. I knew which password still had the founder's kid's birthday in it. I knew which vendor would accept a last-minute invoice as long as I sent them a case of craft beer. My name wasn't on the pitch decks or press releases, but if you open the hood, it was my fingerprints on every screw. The first real crack came 6 months before everything blew up. Our longtime warehouse partner got bought out, and a logistics nightmare rolled downhill straight into my lap. For weeks, I slept 4 hours a night, hand-mapping shipping redundancies and renegotiating terms over lukewarm leftovers. Nobody above me noticed. Nobody had to, because I got it done. That's what I did. Then Trent slithered in. A whisper first. Then a Slack announcement with too many emojis. Then a town hall Zoom where the founder, bronzed and smiling like a retirement brochure, said words like evolution, growth, and next-gen energy before introducing his nephew like he was unveiling a Tesla. Trent wore a blazer over a hoodie, smiled like a politician, used the word optics unironically. I knew, instantly, knew we were all screwed, but I smiled, nodded, took notes, and started backing up files. Because sometimes you don't wait for the storm to hit. You build the ark quietly. Everyone else is still sunbathing. Trent showed up on day 1 with a standing desk, a ring light, and the misplaced confidence of a guy who thinks calling women M-lady is charming. He didn't even shake my hand. Just walked in, made a sweeping gesture at the open floor plan like he was Caesar returning to Rome, and said, "We're gonna modernize this place. Too much dead weight. Dead weight." I had onboarded 4 of the 5 departments he just pranced past, built our vendor pipeline after 2 failed audits, streamlined our contractor system when legal forgot to update half their NDAs. But sure, Dead weight. The founder's email had made it sound like a sabbatical. I'm stepping back for a bit, time to recharge, recenter, and reconnect with the ocean. Trent, he said, would be holding down the fort. Fresh eyes, fresh ideas, same values. It read like a vacation auto-reply from a cult leader, but I knew what it really meant. The old man was out. The frat brat was in, and we were all just characters in Trent's origin story. He didn't even pretend to learn how things worked before swinging the axe. Within 2 weeks, he'd laid off 3 project managers, consolidated the content team under a marketing bro he used to DJ with in Miami, hired a growth consultant named Jax who wore fingerless gloves indoors, and once described our client pipeline as low vibe. The moment that really nailed it, Trent standing in the middle of the bullpen, sipping a canned matcha, waving his arms around like he was parting the Red Sea. We need less clutter, more movement. You feel me? These cubicles are killing our innovation, Kai. Our what? I watched him dismantle things I'd built with the care of a demolition crew in a church. Legacy, vendors we'd worked with for a decade were replaced with flashy disruptors who couldn't meet deadlines if you stapled the calendar to their foreheads. He changed payroll platforms mid-cycle because this new one has an AI chatbot that compliments you. It told me I had good posture. I wanted to throw my monitor out the window. And through it all, I smiled. Took notes, documented everything. Dates, contracts, names. The night he threw a reorg kickoff party in the middle of Q3 crunch week, I skipped the pizza and went home to scan our original vendor agreements. Cross-referenced names. Noticed how 3 of the new vendors had shell companies tracing back to Trent's college roommate. I didn't confront him, didn't ask questions. I played the same game I'd always played. Stay quiet, stay useful, stay ready. But I started saving versions of everything. Labeled folders. Quiet emails to my personal inbox. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. It was survival. Then came the day he looked me dead in the face during a leadership huddle and said, "Look, I respect what you've done, but we really need to stop doing things the dinosaur way. This isn't 2006. No offense, but we need fresh energy." Fresh energy. That's what he called firing 2 admin leads and replacing them with a TikTok strategist and a guy named Blaze who thought HR stood for hot rebrands. I'd been called worse. I smiled again, even offered Blaze a tour of the intranet while quietly noting his repeated failure to badge into the building without help. By week 4, the Whisper network was alive. People were worried. Some were panicking. Me, I started printing. I started backing up. I checked the bylaws. I checked the voting structure. I called a friend from a firm that specialized in executive transitions. Casually, over lunch, hypothetically. Trent wasn't stupid. That was the problem. He was just arrogant enough to think he was smart. That made him dangerous. He knew how to talk to investors, how to schmooze a boardroom. But he didn't know our servers, our people, our duct tape systems held together with legacy code and caffeine. Didn't know how many times I'd saved this company from the brink without a single memo getting written about it. And worst of all, he didn't care, so I watched. I smiled. I nodded at his ideas about gamifying onboarding and redefining legacy stakeholders. And I quietly updated a spreadsheet labeled potential triggers. Because if Trent was going to treat this company like his personal playground, he'd eventually trip one. And I was going to be ready when he did. Budget meetings were never fun, but they used to be civil. We'd sit in the glass box conference room with too much natural light, sip burnt coffee from the Keurig that hadn't been cleaned since the Obama administration, and hash out numbers like adults. Someone would complain about software license costs. Someone else would forget what QTD meant, and I'd quietly solve the puzzle in the background, like usual. But this one was a circus. Trent had called it a strategy sync, which is what he called all meetings that should have been emails. He'd brought in half the junior staff to observe and learn, which really meant watch me perform dominance theater on the people who actually know things. He strutted in 5 minutes late, wearing a blazer over a graphic tee that said I work OUT my feelings, and immediately turned the thermostat down 5 degrees. Power move, I guess, was walking the team through departmental variances, why marketing had gone 12% over, surprise. Trent's rebrand campaign had involved a neon billboard no one approved, why ops came in under. I'd renegotiated a shipping clause in Q2. Standard stuff. Then came the wellness line item. We'd launched it years ago after back-to-back flu seasons took out half our support team. Stipends for gym memberships, mental health days, ergonomic chairs if you'd been here over a year. Nothing fancy, but it had quietly slashed our sick days and improved retention. One of the few initiatives I was proud of. Trent leaned back in his chair, arms folded, smiling like he just farted silently. "Yeah, we're killing that," he said. Silence. I blinked. "Excuse me?" He turned to the room like he was teaching a class on bad leadership. "The wellness bonus. That's out. We're trimming fat." No offense to whoever pushed that through back in the day. Probably seemed progressive at the time. But right now we need lean, mean delivery machines. I felt 30 pairs of eyes dart toward me. A few interns visibly shrank into their hoodies. One of the engineers coughed awkwardly. Trent wasn't done. Frankly, he continued, spinning his pen like he was auditioning for Succession. "Dayton, Ohio, some of these legacy initiatives just don't make sense anymore. It's a new era. We're not in a place where we can reward people for just showing up. If you want perks, deliver like a startup. Otherwise," he paused, locking eyes with me. "You should thank me for letting you stay this long." I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. I just closed my notebook slowly. The pen I was using, a cheap black Pilot G2, clicked with a finality that felt biblical. I glanced at the junior staff, most of whom now looked like they wanted to disappear into the floor tiles. Even Blaze, HR's fingerless-gloved mascot, seemed confused. "Understood," I said, and I walked out, didn't slam the door, didn't mutter a word, just left like I was going to the bathroom, like I'd be right back. But I didn't come back. Instead, I walked to my desk, grabbed my coat, and stepped out into the gray Ohio drizzle that always made the building smell like wet carpet and regret. I sat in my car, exhaled once, slow and deep, and pulled out my personal phone. One contact, first name only. A woman I'd met years ago at a compliance seminar where they served tuna salad in a ballroom that smelled like mildew and old money. She had been the keynote speaker, razor-sharp, ex-corporate counsel turned strategic investor liaison. Back then, we bonded over shared war stories and bad catering. I kept her number, just in case. I hit call. "Lena," I said when she answered. "You still watching our shop from the sidelines?" She chuckled. "I heard you guys hired a mascot in a hoodie. What's going on? Time to talk. Privately, I have documents. And I think we're at the point where your firm might want to make a move." There was a pause. A quiet, surgical pause. Then, "I'm listening." That was it. That was the moment the gear turned. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things, I just pivoted. Humiliation has a funny way of clarifying your priorities. He wanted a war. He thought I'd fight it with Slack threads and hallway arguments. He had no idea I'd already started building the bomb. It started with a folder labeled Q3 discrepancies, buried innocuously in my personal drive. From the outside, it looked like any other internal audit doc, budget drift, vendor issues, quarterly procurement notes. But inside it was war. It wasn't just angry. I was methodical. The kind of calm you get after a car crash, where the adrenaline clears and all you can hear is your own pulse. Humiliation didn't paralyze me, it weaponized me. And I knew exactly where to start. First, the emails. I pulled every thread Trent had CC'd me on involving contract overrides, policy revisions, and that one spectacular note where he greenlit a vendor change on a Saturday at 2 a.m. with zero documentation because, and I quote, "these dudes party but they deliver." I highlighted the ones that violated our procurement policy, saved PDFs, and labeled them potential breach a through J. There would be more. Next came payroll. I had access, had for years, not because of some shady power grab, but because no one else had the attention span to reconcile compensation records with performance bands. I wasn't even in HR. It was just the one who fixed things when numbers didn't add up. And buddy, they didn't add up. New hires, Trent's buddies, were pulling salaries 30% above band, without titles that matched. One had been listed as product evangelist, which I had to Google to confirm wasn't a cult. Another, growth Sherpa. Neither had deliverables. Both had corporate cards. One spent $1,700 at a place called Whiskey Disco in Austin. I cataloged all of it, matched it against the org chart. Noted missing timesheets. Noted conflicts of interest, like how Blaze had approved his own budget increase the same day he consulted on a DEI initiative that consisted entirely of buying succulents for the break room. I almost admired the stupidity. Almost. Once the foundation was set, I met Lena for coffee. A real meeting. In person. Not over Slack, not over a burner Zoom. She showed up in a gray wool coat, sunglasses tucked into her neckline, and a folder already in her hand. "You came prepared," I said. I knew you wouldn't call unless it was real, she replied. We sat at a corner table in a diner that smelled like bacon grease and broken dreams. I handed her a drive. She handed me a printout. It was a shareholder ledger. What's this? I asked. The new math, she said. The founder's been diluting his equity for years. Silent rounds, mostly to cover debt. Not shady, just quiet. I scanned it. My heart thudded once, then went still. He didn't own the company anymore, not really. Officially, yes, he was still listed as majority stakeholder. But through a maze of holding companies, note conversions, and one very strategic capital injection, someone else held the golden key. A private equity group Lena was advising. One with no appetite for nepotism, and that had a clause buried in the bylaws that could nullify executive appointments made without board ratification. A clause Trent had ignored. I looked up at her. You're saying I'm saying, she interrupted. If someone were to bring documented policy breaches and fiscal mismanagement to the table, the firm could trigger Clause 14B. It's a reversion clause. Interim roles dissolve. Board control reverts to stakeholders. And the board, stacked with people who hate him, she said, including one who voted for you to be COO last year. Before you declined. I had declined. Because back then, I still believed in keeping the circus functional. But now I was tired of feeding peanuts to the clowns. Lena slid an envelope across the table. This is the draft agreement. It needs a few final pieces, but if you can connect the dots on intent to mislead, it's actionable. You deliver it at a formal executive session. It triggers automatically. I stared at it. The paper wasn't heavy, but it felt like a grenade. I'll get you the rest, I said. Give me a week. Lena smiled. Take 3 days. I left that diner with the envelope tucked into my laptop bag and my spine 3 inches straighter. That night, I didn't go home. I went to the office. After hours, let myself in with my badge and a thermos of gas station coffee. I stayed until dawn, compiling, formatting, cross-referencing, every misstep, every lie, every smug, sloppy maneuver from a man who thought he'd inherited a kingdom. He hadn't. He'd inherited a noose, and I was just about ready to pull. The first message came on a Thursday, tucked between calendar invites and discount codes for ergonomic chairs I'd never order. It was from Kara Facilities, 12 years in, quiet as a snowflake but always watching. Subject line, you okay? Just that. No body text. No emojis. Kind of message that didn't ask for an answer. It just reached out across the battlefield with a white flag and a cigarette. I replied a few hours later with, hanging in. You. She sent back a thumbs up and a file marked Ice Machine Service Log 2021, which definitely wasn't about ice. Inside was a screenshot of a Slack message, forwarded by someone else, then screenshotted again. Classic Whisper Network protocol. Showed Trent messaging a group titled Ops Refresh, asking if it was too aggressive to restructure leadership without a legacy figure like her muddying the optics. Her, not my name, not my title, just her. The goal was clear, phase me out by the end of the quarter. Blame it on evolution. Maybe dangle a consultant role like a stale carrot. Clean slate, bro style. I didn't rage. I didn't march into his office and start swinging an HR handbook. I just sat back in my chair and pulled up the digital bylaws. The real ones, not the sanitized PDF Trent, had probably skimmed between protein shakes. Clause 14B. It was there, just like Lena said. Legalese as dry as sawdust, but the intent was unmistakable. Any interim appointment made without full board ratification could be deemed invalid if challenged by a stakeholder holding over 15% equity. If evidence of fiduciary misconduct was present, the clause could trigger a full reversion vote with only a 2-member quorum. I double-checked our org chart, 3 board members, one of whom hadn't shown up in person in 2 years. The other, a man named Stuart Lang. Stuart was the founder's former college roommate, his original seed investor, and the only reason our health insurance didn't come from a cereal box. He didn't talk much, didn't post, didn't showboat. He'd quietly opposed the founder's nephew takeover in the initial minutes after the transition announcement. I remembered the flicker of his Zoom window, muted, arms crossed, brow furrowed like someone smelling expired yogurt. I'd never emailed Stuart directly. We didn't run in the same circles. He was board level. I was operations. He wore tailored suits. I wore sneakers with orthotics. But this was the moment. I opened a blank draft. Subject Clause 14B Company Governance. I kept it short. 4 bullet points, each one hyperlinked to a secure drive folder. I didn't editorialize. I didn't beg. I simply stated the facts. violations of vendor procurement protocol, unauthorized compensation changes, payroll mismatches across executive hires, Slack logs implying retaliatory restructuring at the bottom. Added one line, should you wish to discuss next steps before the reversion clause becomes necessary, I am available discreetly. I hit send and stared at the screen like it might shatter. 3 hours later, I received a reply. One word, understood, that was it, but it was everything. Momentum, faint and precious, had begun. Over the next 2 days, more signals trickled in. Arcus from IT quietly slid me access logs showing after-hours database wipes tied to Trent's assistant. Deirdre from Finance, usually more concerned with lunchtime Wordle streaks, dropped a note saying, if you ever need someone to verify discrepancies, I've been saving some reports. She didn't elaborate. She didn't have to. Even Gary, who once told me he thought compliance was a skin condition, mumbled in passing, this place ain't right lately. Just saying. We're all watching, waiting, tired of the circus, tired of being made to feel like relics in a system they'd built. But not everyone was a silent ally. Blaze, still high on the fumes of whatever HR conference he'd just returned from, started asking questions. Not professional ones, just too many. What are you working on? Hey, why were you in the server room last night? Trent said you might be taking time off, true? He smiled too much when he asked. Or cologne thick enough to be used as paint stripper. I smiled back. Just prepping end-of-quarter reports, making sure we're audit-ready. Nice, he said. Love that. So proactive. I wanted to staple his lanyard to the wall. Still, I played the part. Nodded, deferred, smiled with my molars. But the list of names in my mental safe to loop in column grew. Slowly, carefully. And so did the folder. I renamed it. From Q3 discrepancies to Activation Package 14B. Momentum wasn't loud. It didn't announce itself. It whispered. And I'd learned how to listen. The CFO's name was Alan, but everyone called him Spreadsheet Jesus because he could resurrect a budget with 3 formulas and a dead look in his eyes. He didn't speak unless necessary, blinked like a man calculating interest in real time. Once spent an entire holiday party in the corner reading Sarbanes-Oxley on his Kindle. He'd never picked a side in his life. He lived in the Switzerland of middle management. So when Alan asked to sync briefly on discretionary spending, my pulse spiked half a beat. It wasn't casual. Alan didn't sync. He issued calendar invites with 3-digit meeting codes and no agenda lines. When I opened his invite, I saw it. 4:00 p.m. Conference room 6C, private. I walked in with a manila folder and my best poker face. He was already seated, tablet in front of him, columns glowing. Something odd came up in the Q3 audit trail, he said, not looking up. Vendor swaps that don't match approval logs. New names, high burn, no justification. I sat. Calmly placed my folder on the table. Wasn't that Trent's initiative? I asked, feigning polite confusion. I assumed finance was looped. Finally looked at me, eyes flat and glassy. We weren't. And several of these vendors bill through secondary LLCs. That's not standard. That was as close to red flag as Alan got. I opened the folder. Here's a summary doc I prepped for budget alignment. Covers most of what you're seeing. I pulled timelines, invoice deltas, and org chart impact to get ahead of year-end. Alan took it without a word, flipped through the pages, slowed at the appendices where I'd included screenshots of Slack authorizations, backdated invoices, and an anonymized whistleblower memo about procurement conflicts. None of it screamed this is a coup, but every page was a seed. Why wasn't this escalated? He asked. I figured it would surface organically, I replied, and I didn't want to jump the chain of command without internal confirmation. He looked at me for a long second, the kind of silence that makes skin itch. See, he said, nothing else. The meeting ended 10 minutes later with him saying, I'll take this under review, but I saw it, the tiniest shift in his posture, the beginning of doubt. Alan didn't like chaos, but he hated procedural exposure, which is exactly what I'd given him. By the time I got back to my desk, Lena had already texted. Lena, final docs prepped. Need your green light. Me, confirmed, waiting for timing. Lena, once it's delivered, clause activates. No reversal without full vote. You sure? Me. I was born in this building, I'm sure. That night I stayed late, not for appearances, not for panic, but to rehearse. The envelope was ready. Heavy cardstock, no logo. Inside, a notarized reversion activation letter co-signed by the silent stakeholder and legal counsel from the firm Lena represented. It was structured like a dull compliance update, deliberately boring. Language that looked like filler until you read line 9. Interim executive appointments issued post-dilution, absent board ratification, are hereby deemed null per Clause 14b, effective immediately upon delivery of this notice. It didn't ask for permission. It activated. I printed 2 copies, one for the CFO, one for Trent, both identical, both atomic. I double-checked the shareholder ledger. The ownership math hadn't changed. Ina's firm held the edge by 2.1%, masked behind a shell entity registered in Delaware. Stuart Lang, the silent board member, had already been looped. The lawyer who drafted the clause back in 2015, now general counsel for Lena's investment firm. The whole thing was legal, enforceable, airtight. The only missing piece, timing. I needed a window where Alan would be present, where Trent couldn't spin it in private. A moment engineered for clarity. Optics didn't matter because legality spoke first. And that moment, Trent had scheduled a Q4 pivot session with senior staff and finance leads, a fancy term for a self-congratulatory download disguised as collaboration. Perfect. I tucked the envelopes into my leather binder, left the office at 8:12 p.m., didn't speak to anyone, didn't text Lena. Just drove home, made tea I wouldn't drink, and laid awake replaying everything in my head. What if Alan froze? What if Stuart backpedaled? What if Trent smiled and found a loophole we missed? My brain chewed on these questions like a dog on a bone. But under it all, under the noise and fear, there was something sharper. Not hope, not rage, readiness. This wasn't sabotage, it was correction. And tomorrow morning, the House of Cards was going to meet gravity. The invite hit my inbox at 7:43 a.m. Subject, performance alignment, review urgent time, 8:30 a.m. Location, founder's office reserved, not my office. Not a neutral room. The founder's office, the mahogany-paneled museum piece no one used since he left for Florida and forgot to come back. They wanted a stage. I gave them the performance. I wore black, blazer, no accessories, no lipstick. The kind of look that says, I came to read your obituary, not to write it. Leather binder in my hand felt heavier than usual. Inside, the envelope printed on thick stock, corners sharp enough to draw blood. No fanfare, just words, words with teeth. When I walked in, Trent was already there, seated behind the desk like he owned it. Alan stood to the side, tablet under one arm, lips pressed so tight they looked medically sealed. The blinds were open. A sunny morning outside. Inside, all knives and shadows. Thanks for coming, Trent said, acing his fingers like he was about to bless the room. We wanted to touch base on a few concerns. I sat. He launched right in. No slides, no documents, just posture and smugness. I've been getting feedback from leadership, he said, drawing out the word like he invented it. Concerns about alignment, about tone, about whether your legacy perspective is still in sync with our evolving culture. I said nothing. I mean, don't get me wrong, he added, smirking. We've done some solid stuff over the years, but we're shifting, scaling, modernizing, and some folks feel like maybe your approach isn't exactly agile. Alan didn't look up. Trent leaned forward, elbows on the desk. Like, I respect the whole boots-on-the-ground thing you've got going. I do. But at a certain point, we need visionaries, not hall monitors. Still, I said nothing. Trent tapped a pen against the desk like a judge ready to sentence. We're offering you a soft landing. Consultant track, reduced hours, same pay for transition period. Then we revisit in Q1. Friendly, mutually beneficial. I could feel the blood rising in my ears, a slow thrum like distant thunder. But my face, marble. Alan cleared his throat. If I may, he said, turning his tablet to show a scan page, I came across something last night. In the 2015 policy binder. Section 4, Clause 14b. Trent's brow furrowed. What's that? Alan looked at me, just once, then back to his screen. It outlines requirements for interim executive appointments post-equity dilution. Specifically, it mentions that any such appointment, if made without full board ratification, can be deemed invalid and subject to immediate reversion. A beat of silence. Trent laughed. One of those fake, breathy chuckles that never makes it to the eyes. Okay, Alan. Cool little trivia fact. That clause was probably never activated. I reached into my binder. Slowly, deliberately. Do you have anything to say? Trent asked, leaning back like he'd already won. Or are we good to proceed with the consultant offer? I slid the envelope across the desk. No flourish, no speech. Just the sound of paper on wood. Alan picked it up. Opened it. Trent watched his face shift, smirk slipping, skin draining, posture crumbling one vertebra at a time. Alan cleared his throat again, this time slower. This is, signed, notarized, Stuart Lang co-signatory, effective today. Trent blinked. Stuart signed this, Alan nodded. Trent turned to me, voice cracking around the edges. What the hell is this? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The silence answered for me, 15 years worth of it, wrapped in audits and policies and buried contracts Trent never thought anyone read. His eyes darted to Alan, then the letter. Back to me? You're bluffing, he said. This is nothing. This is, Alan cut him off. It's binding. Trent's mouth opened, then closed. He stood again. This isn't how things are done, he snapped. This isn't fair. You went behind my back. You undermined my authority. I finally spoke. You never had any. And with that, I stood, collected my binder, and walked toward the door. Behind me, Trent stammered something unintelligible. Alan didn't respond. I didn't look back. Alan held the document like it might bite him. His eyes flicked across the first page, then the second, then paused halfway down the third, right where Lena's firm's name appeared in block serif above a line of signatures. His lips parted, but nothing came out at first. Then finally, who signed off on this? Trent leaned forward like a vulture smelling rot. Yeah, let's hear it. Who the hell thinks they can just, Stuart Lang, Alan interrupted, voice flat, and Barrack Capital. Room went dead quiet. Trent's mouth opened, then snapped shut like a puppet on broken strings. He reached for the document, but Alan pulled it back, not hostile, just precise. He read the rest in silence, expression hollowing out with each paragraph. Clause 14b wasn't just theoretical. It was implemented, signed, notarized. The shareholder math was airtight. Trent's title, power, even his office, nullified as of that morning. No board vote required. No appeal window. The clause operated like a guillotine, clean, fast, irreversible. Alan slowly turned to Trent. This says your appointment was never valid. Trent stood so fast his chair clattered to the floor. That's a goddamn ambush. This is illegal. You can't just, Alan, tell her. Tell her this won't stand. Alan didn't answer. He was already pulling his phone from his pocket. We need legal, now, he said. Then, looking at me, this activates immediately. I nodded. Left the room, not in a rush, not in chaos, but with the slow, heavy steps of a man who realizes the floor has just dropped out from under his career. Trent pointed at me, hand trembling just enough to betray the panic now bubbling through his rehearsed bravado. You think this fixes anything? You've just tanked your own future. This is treason. I raised one eyebrow. We're a tech firm, Trent, not a monarchy. His eyes darted, feral, confused. Think they'll keep you on after this? I smiled, not a grin, not triumphant. Just calm. I didn't do this to stay. I did this to end it. Outside the door, I could hear Alan's voice rising slightly, urgent but measured, the kind of tone reserved for lawsuits and pre-crisis press releases. Words like binding instrument and shareholder override filtered through the heavy wood like a slow wave rolling toward shore. Trent dropped into the chair I'd just vacated, staring at nothing, breathing through his nose like a bull that just realized the matador brought a rifle. I stepped into the hallway. People were already looking up from their screens, some curious, some confused, but a few, just a few, already knew. Deirdre caught my eye from the finance pod and gave the slightest nod. Marcus from IT turned back to his screen, smiling like someone who just watched the villain trip on his own shoelace. By the elevator, I paused. Behind me, the panic had begun. Alan barking into the phone. Blaze's voice cracking as he asked if reassignments would be communicated via memo. Somewhere, someone dropped a coffee mug, and Trent, now irrelevant, shouted something about lawyers, lawsuits, legacies. None of it mattered. The machine had already turned. The clause didn't ask for permission. It executed. And for the first time in months, I could breathe. I didn't savor it, didn't linger. There's a version of me, maybe the version Trent imagined, who would have stood in the chaos, arms crossed, basking in the meltdown. That's not who showed up today. I'd already said what needed saying, and most of it was written in contracts anyway. The kind of language that doesn't require interpretation, just enforcement. I stood, adjusted my blazer, crease sharp, collar clean, and picked up my binder. One motion. No drama. Room behind me was starting to hum like a nest of disturbed wasps. Phones ringing, Slack notifications dinging like heart monitors, muffled voices rising from the bullpen as news began to ooze through the seams. Alan was still on the phone, reading out a section of the clause word for word to someone in legal. His tone had shifted fully into crisis containment. No more neutrality, just procedure now. Trent was still in the chair, slouched, mouth open. A man learning, real time, that his parachute was a paper napkin. I walked past him. Wait, he started, voice pinched and desperate. You can't just walk out like Alan without even looking up. Cut in, don't, just don't. That was the last thing I heard him say. I didn't slow down. Past the meeting room. Past the corner office they'd once considered giving me, until Trent decided it had more brand energy as a meditation space. Past the kitchen where someone had left a sad plate of bagels no one touched. Down the row of desks where interns sat slack-jawed, pretending to be deep in spreadsheets while their eyes flicked toward me like I'd just flipped over the table at a wedding. Deirdre stood. Not a salute, not a cheer, just stood, quietly, respectfully, like a witness. A second later, Marcus from IT gave a small, two-finger tap on his desk. Subtle, kind of gesture you only notice if you know what it means. And then there was Kara from facilities, standing in the hallway with a mop and a look in her eye that said, "I knew you'd do it." She didn't speak. She just nodded once, then turned back toward her cart. I didn't wave, didn't break stride. I didn't owe anyone a farewell tour. This wasn't a movie. It was an exit, a clean one. At the security gate, the guard, Ted, I think, retiree who always called me ma'am even when I asked him not to, buzzed me out without comment. He met my eye through the glass and gave a little chin raise. Outside, the sun was still pretending it was spring, even though the wind had teeth. The building behind me loomed, tall and glassy and full of rot, but I wasn't in it anymore. I walked to my car, sat behind the wheel, and for the first time in months, I exhaled, not the shallow breath you take when things are tense. A full one, deep, grounded, final. The kind you take when the thing chasing you is finally behind you. My phone buzzed, one message, "Lena, clean execution. Stakeholders are aligned, congrats." I didn't reply, instead I started the car, rolled down the window, let the cold air slap my face. Back inside that building, they'd be rewriting org charts, issuing memos, spinning Trent's disappearance into a strategic transition. Someone would pretend he got a better opportunity. Maybe they'd even thank him in a LinkedIn post. None of it mattered. He was out. I didn't take his place. I took his power away, and that was enough. Appreciate you sticking around, you wise old rebels. Smash that subscribe button, or this fossil might just cause another epic fiasco.